This is a clap for the translators.
Yay!
Hello and welcome. My name is Nicola Silva, and I'd love to introduce you to Sarah B., who lives on the Sunshine Coast in beautiful Queensland. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi. Sarah is a mum of a boy and girl twins who are now 16. So I'm sure you have lots of great stories and great tools for us tonight.
Yes, I'm sure I do. And I would also like to introduce Nicola. Nicola has a boy and girl also, now 22 and 18. One's just started university and the other one is just finishing. So I'm sure you've got some interesting stories to tell too.
Yes.
Nicola also says that her kids are not angels and they get up to all the usual stuff that teenagers do. So I'm sure she's also said that access consciousness has been a lifesaver for her as well. So that's really exciting. Yay.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Sarah.
You're welcome.
In thinking about this topic of cool, calm, and relaxed with kids, I was just looking on my own life, and I wonder if I could ask you, Sarah, what were you like as a teenager?
That's an interesting question, but a good one. What was I like? I had very strict parents, and I had some very unusual talents, capacities, and abilities. Like I could hear the voices in other people's heads. I could see the energy in their body, and I knew a lot of things that they didn't really know how I knew. And so my parents were very strict with me, and they really wanted me to conform and fit in. And so they were very controlling with me, and they entrained me very much into being the good girl. And after a while of being the good girl, guess what? I got sick of being the good girl and unfortunately went the other end of it, which was being the bad girl. But what I realized I was reacting to, and this has helped me a lot as a parent today, is what I realized I was reacting to was the control, not the suggestions that the parents were making. So because they were making, let's say, sensible suggestions, and I was reacting to the control, it actually blocked off all the ways that I could have actually made the decent choices that I would have desired to naturally have made if they hadn't kept interfering. So one of the tools that Access has brought to my attention is the importance of asking questions to teenagers in particular. And so I often will ask my kids, hey, if you choose that, what's it going to create? And they're like, oh, yeah, that's going to work really well. And oh, no, that's not going to work at all. And so when you allow the child to actually have their own awareness, it's really helpful because they then act from themselves and not from as if someone else is always going to be around to tell them what to do. And so sometimes we can learn from the opposite of parenting, which was my case. And what I would like to have received instead, and it would have been, hey, Sarah, if you choose this, what's that going to lead to? Hey, Sarah, if you know. And so I've done that with my children quite successfully, and they've been able to make more of what I would call the mainstream choices, where they haven't gone to resistance and reaction. And it's given them the empowerment, I suppose, that they require. So, that's a little bit about my childhood, and one of the things that I've learned that I've then changed using the tools of Access Consciousness, which is the questions. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, Nicola, what were you like as a teenager?
Oh, it's so funny, I think I was hard work.
Right.
I was a bit of a know-it-all and could be quite argumentative, wanting to have the last word always.
Yeah.
My poor mom, she was a single mom, so like I said, maybe I was a bit of hard work for her. And what I learned from that was when I was a mom myself and my kids were teenagers, I happened to be in an Access class with the founder of Access, Gary Douglas, and he was talking about the teenage years. And so my ears pricked up because I was always looking for some tools I could use with my own kids. And he talked about acknowledging your kids for the job they're doing. and I thought, oh, what is the job of of a teenager? And what he said was, a teenager's job is to drive you crazy so they can get your money. So
Yeah.
the next time I got into like a bit of an argument with my son, I remembered this tool and I said to him, "Oh, you're doing a really good job." And that kind of stopped. It stopped him in his tracks because he's like, "Oh, what do you mean? What am I doing?" It's a bit like you were talking about, Sarah, with the questions.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then I said, "Oh, look, I know it's your job to drive me crazy so you can get my money, but I don't really have so much money." And it was just amazing. He just shut up and walked away. And that totally changed that situation. And so I have, as I said, the tools of access have been really very much a lifesaver to me in these last few years of being a mom. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
very grateful to access.
Yeah. Likewise. Yeah.
So, so so on that topic of being a mom, I just wonder, um, what what does it mean to be a parent to you, Sarah? What do you bring to the parenting?
Um, I think for me, it really is. Yeah, and I'm so grateful for Access as well because my children have been lucky enough to be in some of the Access classes since they were 7, and so just having had them run around in the classes, I've been really grateful for them to pick up all the different energies that they were aware of at the time, and just so that you guys know that with Access Conscious classes, children are free up to the age of 16. And it is, it's been of enormous value to me. I couldn't necessarily tell you exactly what my children have picked up, but what I do know today is that they do function from who they are. And when people try to convince them otherwise, they are very able to say, no, that's not true for me, and have ease of that. So that's important to me. Also, trying to think what else is important. Really knowing the difference between when you're controlling them and when you're caring for them by asking them questions. So I don't always get that correct. Like there's times where I really would like to tell them, but it really is about providing the space for once you've made the suggestion and they're not going ahead with what you might be aware of, to actually allow them the space to follow what they think is going to work so that they actually get the awareness for themselves. I know that was one of the biggest things that I had to do was with Jack and a hot plate. And I know that he actually had to experience how hot the hot plate was with his fingers. And every part of me didn't want him to burn his fingers. But once he touched it once, we didn't have any more problems with electrical sockets or anything else. So
And that's very much the case because as parents we want to protect our kids and so that they don't have, quote unquote bad experiences, but sometimes it gives them some awareness that they wouldn't have otherwise. Would you agree with that? Or?
definitely, I feel that well, Jack only this week. Well, what actually happened is I was working in the garden. He rolled out of bed at 9 o'clock and wandered into the garden and said, "Why didn't you wake me up?" And I said, "Well, I actually didn't know. I thought you had gone to school. I didn't genuinely know you were still in the house." And he said, "Well, I set 3 alarms." And I said, "Well, maybe you need 4." And left the problem with him rather than trying to then put that back onto me, where I was then meant to make sure he was up every morning, because that's not something that I'm able to take on. So it really is just gently putting it back into their space and allowing them to be late for school. In this particular case, it was once. And having the experience of that, and then they then make the future choices as to whether they want to explain to the teachers where they were, etc. So yeah, I think that's kind of what parenting means to me. It's like trying to give them some sensible suggestions, but then also allow them to experience what they need to experience for themselves. Yeah. What about you? What about you, Nicola?
Well, I don't want anyone to get the idea that I'm the perfect mom or the mom of the year or anything like that, because I'm not. and I use the tools of access to have ease with the
Yeah.
teenage years. And so for me, when I became a mom, it was like, because my own childhood was quite harsh. I wanted to have my kids to have the things I didn't have, and I wanted
Mm.
them to have, you know, positive experiences. And so I tried for a long time to get parenting right, to be a good mom, to be the perfect mom. I'm sure you haven't done that, Sarah.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about, Nicola.
But what it ends up creating is a lot of self-judgment.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so what I have actually come around to is that, just be willing to be a useless parent, which is what
Mm.
the Gary Douglas talks about. He says, be willing to be the useless parent so that your kids have to step up, like, your son had to with, going to school on time and do things like that. And also like to have that willingness to manipulate my kids a little bit.
Mhm. What do you
So that
mean?
well, you can manipulation is considered to be, a negative thing or a bad thing, but if when you're doing it for the someone to empower them, it's actually quite a good tool you can use.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you can, manipulate your kids to do things that they might not want to do, because the teenagers are like highly, where they're in resistance to anything you say. So if you say something that helps them get better grades, or study a bit more or do something like that, that's manipulating to create an outcome that is greater than otherwise. Because
Mhm.
what I've found is that, like, doing, the angry tirade, or yelling at your kids, or being very strict, doesn't really produce the results that you'd like, and it's often not very harmonious at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so parenting to me is not being the perfect parent, to be myself and not judge myself if I stuff up. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, sometimes I use manipulation as well. Like I will say to them, "Oh, I don't know if you can do that,"
Yeah.
and so just watch me. Don't.
My daughter, when she was 15, she went on a student exchange to Belgium for 3 months, and that was a couple of years ago. And she said to me at the time, I didn't encourage her. I said, but apparently I said, I don't think you'll choose this, and so she chose it out of resistance to my words. But you know, I mean, I
Yeah.
think she chose it because she wanted to go overseas and live by herself away from the parents. But yeah, it's one of those other experiences that produced a different result.
Yeah. And probably life changing for her and her world.
Oh yes, she really, it really made a huge difference in her life, because she came out of that, like, dependency on waiting for mom to do everything, where she knew she had to get out of bed every day and do her own things. And yeah, so it
Yeah.
was great. Um, so I just wanted to ask, maybe what what are your three go-to tools with parenting that you'd like to share with people today?
Um, well, definitely, I'm going to say questions again because it is so easy for us to say statements and conclusions create a reaction in the kids of resistance. And so to truly ask a question and also be in interesting point of view while you're asking the question, which is not asking a question to secure an outcome that you as the adult have already secretly predetermined that you are manipulating and steering them to this one and only possible solution that is what you actually really want them to choose. If the parent really can truly be the energy of question, where they're asking the child to actually explore that. So it's going back to when the children are really like 2 or 3, where they are in discovery, they are in wonderment. They, you know, it's like, I wonder what this will create if you choose this.
Yep.
And it's just as relevant as a teenager than it is, you know, as it is a young child. So for me, the work being the adult is to get myself to interesting point of view. And it's not just interesting point of view, I've got that point of view, interesting point of view, he's got that point of view, interesting fucking point of view. Like, it's just, it's not like that. It really is an energy and a space where everything is possible all of the time, and you and the child have total choice with what you become aware of that may in fact be possible for them, which may have nothing to do with a predetermined conclusion for either of you. So really, to open up question sessions with them as an exploration without the need to have a conclusion is probably one of the things that I have done and enjoyed with my children, because especially with what would they like to do as a future career, and they're both opening into these different options. And we just keep the conversation going, and it's a bit like the fireworks of possibilities. So one will go off, and then the other one will go off, and then it's actually very expansive to have conversations that don't have to instantaneously come to a conclusion.
Yeah.
So I think that would be one of my tools. Another one would be really educating the children around choice. Really allowing them to choose and explore what works for them and what doesn't work for them, and also be willing to pay for what doesn't work. So pay for them to make the choice that they think is going to work, even if you know that it may or may not. And then often the parent's wrong, because the child does make it work, but from a completely different perspective. So really giving the child the chance to choose and not have to follow the normal parental, you know, well, your grandfather was a doctor and your father was a doctor, and so now therefore guess what you're going to be in life. And that's not a choice either. So I think finding the time to have those exploratory conversations is really important, and really allowing them to choose what works in their life. And also, I know I learned when I was doing the rebelling and the being the bad the bad girl, which was infinitely more fun than being the good girl. I learned life in reverse, and that also works. It can also bring you more to the space of allowance for yourself and also your children as well, if they want to explore something that is more traditionally judged. And I think the last tool probably I would talk about is really educating your children that judgment that teenagers function from notoriously really is just words and energy. And it really isn't going to kill them. It really isn't going to hurt them. If someone is using judgment with them, what would it take for them to be an allowance of that? You know, what are they defending against? What are the other kids defending against that they don't want you to know? Is a good question to help them. And then they immediately start to look at it as if it's in the other child's space, rather than what have I done wrong in order to create this. And so it's quite useful to really allow the child to really see that a lot of what kids say to them is always projection, and they project onto them. And so to really allow your child to know that anything that comes in an accusational format is always what the other child is doing. And I think I'm just so grateful to Access for, those standard words. Accusation is always what someone else is doing is just so helpful, because then the children are like, oh, there's the energy of accusation. Oh, that's what you're up to. Thank you for letting me know. And then they don't take it on, and then they don't go into the defense, because the usual thing with accusation is the child then starts to work harder to prove that the accusation isn't true. So if a child says, you're mean to one of my kids, and then my kids suddenly go into, I'll prove that I'm not mean, I'll prove that I'm not mean, and then they do everything they can to prove that they're not, giving far too much to the child who is actually mean. So, because the accusation came from them. And so the difference with my kids is they're just like, what do you mean I'm mean? If you think I'm mean, you might be mean. And then it's a way of handing it back quite easily. So really educating your children around judgment. Judgment is just an attempt to control you. Do you really wish to be controlled by someone else's points of view? Or would you like to know what's true for you and bring that forward? And so, I think those are my three my three go-to access tools. What about you, Nicola?
Thank you so much for those three tools, because it is, like you said, being the space of allowance is not always easy, because when teenagers will choose what they will choose, and so having that sense of allowance is just a real gift that they might not see at the time, but later on. Yeah. So for my favorite access tools is, number one is to have my bars run. And if you haven't heard of Access Bars, please look it up on the Access Consciousness website. Yeah. There are bars practitioners all around Australia, and it really is, like I said, a lifesaver. So when you're in that kind of upset, if there's an upset with your teenager or something, it just clears the energy for you, so you can be calm and you can be cool, like we call this conversation. And the second part of that is to have my kids' bars run as well, which they've been less and less willing to do as the older they get. But a sneaky way around that is, because I run bars classes myself. And so if I have an odd number, then I can persuade them or bribe them or to make up the odd number. And then in that way, they get their bars run, and we get a bit of peace and calm in the household for a couple of weeks. So yeah, I highly recommend getting your bars run. And the second thing I would say is that one of the tools of access, and it's not just to use with kids, is to destroy and uncreate your relationship with the people around you every day. And you might think, oh, that's, what do you mean destroy and uncreate? But you can't destroy anything that is true. So all you do is you destroy and uncreate the lies or the points of view or the judgments or the conclusions. So this is something I do every night when I lie in bed. Like, I will destroy and uncreate my relationship with my son, with my daughter, with my husband, with my dog, with my bank balance. So I go through the whole list. And so the next day, it's a fresh start. I can't even remember sometimes if we might have had an upset the previous day. But when you do that every day, and it's a new day, and you wake up, I can look my kids in the eye and say, good morning, how are you? And be that loving, caring energy to them, because I genuinely have forgotten what the upset was from the previous day. So yeah, it's not difficult at all. All you do is you just say, destroy and uncreate my relationship with X, whoever your child is. I destroy and uncreate my relationship with whoever your other child is, if you have more than one. And see what shows up. So this is what I love about the tools of access. They're simple and pragmatic, and it just creates so much change for you. So so those tools I highly recommend. The other thing you could do is, like you said, Sarah, when you were talking about the future career of your kids, or those are projections. Those are things we can project on our kids, knowingly or unknowingly, or saying, that we desire a greater future for them, and that's how we justify doing it. But really, is that kind to them? Is that what they would choose? Is that, where they would like their lives to go? So I'm quite conscious of not having projections or expectations on them, which leads to rejection if they don't fulfill those projections and expectations. So it's like a vicious cycle, really. But you don't, unless you're made aware of it, or unless you have been doing the tools of access, you don't really have that information. So that's why I just want to put it out there to people to just as much as possible to give up projections and expectations, which leads to separation from your kids and to rejecting their choices when their choices don't match up with your choices. And so it's kind of then again that relationship you have is not like clear and clean. It's just cluttered with all these kind of expectations and projections you have of your kids. So try it out, see what shows up.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm definitely going to be more aware of uncreating and destroying our relationships every day, because I haven't done that at night time. But in bed, that would be a great thing just to do before I fall asleep. That would give me a real sense of peace. So thank you. Even, having done Access for ages, just listening to the tools that you're using, it's like, oh yeah, I could do that a bit more. Or Access is amazing like that. You get what you get when you get it, and then you hear it again and you're like, yes, I'm ready for this extra piece now. And it's, Access is such a great building block of questions and pragmatic tools for life. And I'm truly grateful for Access in my world and in my children's worlds, and I can hear that you are too. So if any of you would like more information on Access Consciousness, please look up accessconsciousness.com. If anybody would like a personal session, both Nicola and I do those, and we're both based in Australia, just in case you're in Europe right now. And it's just accessconsciousness.com/get clear. Or you could look both of us up on Facebook. We're really good at receiving personal messages, so you can come and have a chat with us that way if you feel you'd like to connect with us more. And please look up Access Consciousness Bars. It is a lifesaver, as Nicola said. If you go and learn the technique, which is just 32 different points on the head when lightly touched, start to unlock any limitations that you have in your world. If you get your children to learn the bars as well, they can run yours, you can run theirs, you can make it a family activity. It's the possibilities are endless. So I think I'd like to just say thank you very much to everybody who's been listening today, now, and also in the future. And thank you, Nicola, very much as well for joining me in Conversations in Consciousness. It's been a real fun adventure.
Thank you, Sarah. And it's awesome to hear your tools, because it's always good to, get new tools in this kind of journey that we are on as parents. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And I also just wanted to say that if you want even more tools, come back on Friday at same time, same place. Tiffany, the lovely Tiffany, and Pam Grace will be on here talking about, let me just have a quick look. They'll be talking about beyond kids and parenting. So I wonder what that conversation will produce. So
so we can tune in and learn more, can't we?
We can. Have a great evening, morning, night, wherever you are. And thanks so much.
Lovely to see everybody. Take care. We'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.